Hello, hello, everyone. Thank you for the music, Michael. I hope everybody can hear and see me okay. Quick introduction. So my name is Mavis. I use she, her pronouns. I'm currently based in Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire. So if you hear any cockerels or any interesting bird noises, that's basically part of, my gig that comes with the territory. Also baby squeals, that's another one I've added recently. So just be mindful that this is what I'm joining with. For anyone who needs a visual description, I'm a Black cisgender female presenting person. I identify as queer bisexual. I have Black Afro hair, wearing a pair of clear glasses and a navy blue kind of pleated top and sitting in what looks like a little bird cage, but is actually in my chair. We'll just take a few minutes to tell you a bit more about We Create Space and what we do within this space. Well, I'm the program director. We are a global nonprofit platform, a community and collective of queer changemakers on a mission to improve the lives of LGBTQ plus people around the world. And we currently support 100 plus corporate partners. Sometimes it's quite astonishing, but at various stages of their DEI journey. And we do this through consultancy and designing shared learning experiences, producing DEI insights, crafting bespoke content that really support individuals with strengthening their roles as change agents within their communities and organizations. First and foremost, as a nonprofit, community-led social enterprise, all the profit that we make from the work that we do with corporate partners goes back into the LGBTQIA+ community, providing free events like this one, resources, leadership development opportunities, and well-being solutions. And so far, I think it's been over 2 years now, and we've delivered, about 1,000+ events and shared experiences and invested 250,000+ pounds into the LGBTQ+ community. So for those who don't know about us, please, if you'd like to get involved, there are essentially 4 ways you can do that. First one, I probably should go to the top, which is attending this event, which you're doing. So thank you so much. Please, again, go and share our social posts. You can connect with us on social media, LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever suits your fancy. And then the third is about amplifying our speaker voices, their stories and the projects, the articles that we share. And fourth is introducing us to your employer or colleagues or anyone you feel would benefit from our services. So that's me done on this part. But again, if it's your first time in this space, we really want to welcome you and also tell you a bit more about what we do. For those who are returning, about how we run these spaces, the panel setup and how things go. But on the menu today, on the panel, what we'll be bringing together and sharing is around challenging the myth of the Black monolith. And there'll be 2 parts. So the first part is a panel discussion with our amazing speakers here, and then we'll have a Q&A. But if I was to just set the scene for this topic, it's Black History Month. We're having many conversations around Blackness, Black identities, and what that means to the individuals themselves through the lens of history and lived experience. But something that really struck us in doing research for this was that, there are so many myths and ideas. One of them being, people often saying Black is Black. And, it's a beautiful sentiment and kind of utopian idea that regardless of our origin, our race, links us all Black people in this kind of shared community of Blackness, and that all Black people from all backgrounds can be entrusted with the heavy responsibility of representing each other. Well, you'll hear today, I hope that that's not the case, because a Black British European person may not have the same understanding as a Black American, a Black African, or an Afro-Latina or a Caribbean person. And though we may not relate to history in the same way, be it about slavery or colonialism, well, in the same way, we share this innate understanding of the historical oppression and white supremacy that has impacted Black people all over the world, and from every kind of geographic origin. So when layered now with other intersecting identities, be it our gender identity, our queerness, language, culture, socioeconomic background, tradition, you name it, right? These experiences can become even more nuanced and sometimes very complex. So this panel would only highlight our speakers' experiences, individual experiences, and in no way do we seek to diminish the multitude of stories that exist beyond them and we really believe should be told. So, quick word on trigger warning. The discussion may bring up sensitive topics. And we really encourage you as participants to kind of share your thoughts, your questions throughout the session in the Q&A, through the Q&A function or the chat, and just being mindful to address our speakers in a respectful and compassionate manner. But we also ask that you please engage in this session the best way that supports your well-being. So if at any point you experience distress or feel like you need to step away, please do so. You can reach out to myself or my team, Michael, here in the chat for further support. And that's it from me. I'm gonna now hand over to the awesome Z to kick us off and introduce themselves first. Hey, Z.
Hi. Hi, Melis, and hi, everyone. My name is Z, pronounced they, she, and also just a very, very quick visual description. Black individual. I'm wearing a headset that is black, and I'm wearing glasses as well, and the frames are black. My background is blurred, and I'm also wearing a black top. Apparently, I'm going all black today. Like I said, my pronouns are they, she, and a bit about me. So I was born and raised in the Netherlands, came to the UK in 2016. I've been living here. I mainly focus on LGBT inclusion, creating communities, neurodiversity inclusion, and of course, Black queer lives. I speak about my experiences as well, personal experiences mainly. So that is kind of like a bit about me. Now, of course, we are joined by a welcome or by a group of Chloe, Joshua, and Papa. And I would love to give the mic to Joshua so he can introduce himself.
Thank you so much, Z and Melis. I appreciate it. Really excited to be here. I'm Joshua. My pronouns are he, him. For a visual description, I'm Afro-Latino male. I have a big beard that's very black, and I'm wearing black frames glasses. I'm wearing a black and white striped sweater, and my background is sports memorabilia of the New England Patriots. So I'm based out of Boston, Massachusetts. My background is I currently work as a director of talent for a creative advertising agency based out of New York City. And we are rooted in social justice. So I am basically the recruitment manager and really trying to find black and brown and very gender diverse, all of that, trying to bring that into the company, as well as aside from that, I am really trying to be a voice for my generation in terms of queerness and Blackness, and also as I'm reconnecting with my roots, with my Puerto Rican roots, really trying to speak to my Latin community. So I'm really excited to be here, and thank you everyone that's joining. I hope you enjoy, and I'm going to pass the mic to Papa.
Hi, thank you everyone. Hi Joshua, thank you for the very elaborate introduction. Hi, I am Papa Kojo Ampofo. My pronouns are he, him. I am based in Accra, Ghana. I am an activist. I work with Rightify Ghana, a local LGBT rights organization in Ghana. I am also an intersex person, and my work centers around a lot of transness and intersex, basically. So hi, Chloe, can you introduce yourself and then we'll circle back to Z, thanks.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Chloe Fulani. I'm an artist, poet, performance artist, Black feminist. I'm based in London. For visuals, I have orange and red braids, dark-skinned Black woman. I'm wearing a white top. I've got 2 gold necklaces. I'm happy to be here to share with everyone today. Passing the mic back to Z.
Thank you very much for that, Chloe. So just to give an overview of how it's run today. So there's a overview of a couple of questions that I'm going to be asking the panelists today. And there is also an option for you to ask your questions. So I'm talking to the audience here, for you to ask questions if you go to the Q&A button, and you are able to ask that question. If you need live transcript, it also says below, so live transcripts of the CC visual, you will be able to read the subtitles there. So I have two screens just to make sure that I am reading on one and the questions, and then I'm going back to y'all. So I am just going to double check if I'm not forgetting anything. Live transcript is enabled. Yes, so the live transcript is enabled. I will also be keeping an eye on the chat as well, just in case. But that is just a bit on how I will be sort of moderating this discussion. But yeah, let's dive straight into it. So to all the panelists, the first question: tell us about your relationship to Blackness and what it means to you. So just describe the layer of your experience through the lens of, you know, your geographic location, culture, ethnic background, et cetera, et cetera. Whoever wants to go first, that is what I'm giving, who I'm giving the mic to. Don't be shy now.
I guess I can go. Papa, were you gonna?
Take the mic. I can go after you.
Yeah, so great question. My relationship to my Blackness is really interesting for me. Also kind of seeing how other people have you know, experienced their Blackness. For me, my relationship to my Blackness actually started when Trayvon Martin was killed. I grew up with my mother until I was about 12. She passed away when I was 12. And so my father was also not in my life. So after I lost her, I was very much disconnected from my culture and my heritage, and really having a guide to help me understand what my roots were and where I came from. So after that, I ended up moving in with a friend of mine and his family who helped to raise me. But they are mostly a white presenting family. And so it wasn't really an environment for me to understand what my Blackness was, or even what my Puerto Rican culture was. So when Trayvon Martin died and I saw it on the television and everything that was going around in America, I realized that it was affecting me more than it was affecting the people around me. And that was kind of like a realization, like, oh, I'm Black. Like, of course I could see it, but because I lost my mother and never really had that guide for me to like really own in on my Blackness, I felt disconnected for so long. So I never really felt Black, which is like, for me, really interesting. And I felt ashamed about that for a very long time. And so that sparked an identity crisis for me. And I really was like, oh, who am I? Like, who am I? What am I? What groups do I belong to? What community am I part of? And I struggled with that for a very, very long time. So I actually went out into the world and I traveled and lived in different countries trying to like find myself. And for a long time, I thought that I was, you know, building my identity through the experiences that I was having while traveling the world, and thought for a moment that, oh yes, I know who I am. And then I was living in New York City when George Floyd was murdered. And that was like another huge realization, like, oh, you're Black. Like, this is really like you are feeling something more than you probably understood. So that was like a really, really, really big awakening for me. And that's when I really started to understand. I wanted to get more into understanding what being Black meant for me. I started to read a lot about Bayard Rustin and James Baldwin, and really understand what it was, not only being Black, but also being queer and Black, and being a queer Black man. And so reading that, I felt much more connected to myself, and I felt more empowered as a Black man, as a Black gay man. And that's what actually really like pushed me to start doing work and speaking for or speaking within the community and trying to be some type of representation, because I didn't have that growing up. And I didn't want other people to have to go through the things that I went through and feeling disconnected and having like this whole identity crisis. So
Yeah.
that's been my experience, and it's been really interesting, and I feel much more empowered. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks. I will definitely come back to that because I'll definitely have some follow-up questions. Papa, do you want to respond as well?
Yes, sure. So as I indicated earlier, I am based in Ghana. And so I think when it comes to Blackness, I find myself in the intersection of a lot of, in the middle of a lot of intersections. Be it my geographical location, my religion, culture, what have you. I was born in Ghana, West Africa. I grew up here, and I have lived most part of my life here as well. And so my relationship to Blackness has been as an African. Aside that, I also grew up in a society that valued and prided itself in a lot of culture, enforcing a lot of culture and traditions and all these patriarchy. And despite sometimes doing it in a very mean, murderous ways even, it also had a lot of heteronormativity. And so finding myself out of these heteronormative stereotypes, and also I think my culture itself, like, we have a lot of elders who pride themselves in talking about the culture as Africans and Black people, and all that. So I think that's for me is my relationship.
Thank you for that. Chloe, do you have any responses to the question as well?
Yes, so I find it interesting question because there's like Blackness as race, and then Blackness is like ethnicity as well. And I'm Nigerian as well for my ethnic background. Because being like a Black immigrant family that's in the UK, there's like a closeness that I could have to the Nigerian side, but then also when I was raised or like growing up, I knew I was Black in the racial aspect, because there was like the difference that you'd have with the white kids, but I didn't really understand my Blackness in this like unifying way, in this like ethnic idea of Blackness, and this like unifying idea of Blackness in which I can like connect and understand like Black Americans, Black people that's on the continent, Black people in other areas. And that really came about for me as an understanding and like a sort of a source of self. When I started coming to my transhood, I think it was a lot of like, essentially because I was denied almost so much of my humanity, being who I was prior before transitioning, coming and accepting my womanhood, I was able to also accept my wholeness of being a Black woman. So yeah, that's kind of where my relationship to my Blackness kind of came about.
Yeah. I mean, it is very interesting because, of course, I think, Joshua, Chloe, I resonate a lot with what you are saying. Papa, of course, I do not, the link that I have is to Cape Verdean Islands. So my family is from Cape Verdean Islands, but I do not have that much of a connection. Although, when we look specifically at the American history and looking at the word Black, that is, of course, a word that was created because there was a separation between the African continent and Black people, right? So they would call themselves Black. And, so there is so much behind specifically that word that we have now used as a way to describe specifically our relationship to white people, but also our relationship between Black communities, either from the diaspora and on the African continent, of course. So yeah, I mean, like for me, just really quickly, you know, also fully separated from sort of my Blackness, although from the house, from within the household, there was definitely sort of this Black pride. Learned a lot about the Cape Verdean, about Cape Verde and how they got into, you know, how they were managed to you know, become their own country and their own island. And I think that is also very important. So there's a lot of Pan-Africanism, and you feel that very much within our family. But of course, when it comes to, and what you said, Papa, with the heteronormative behaviors, that for me, because I did go back a long time ago to Cape Verdean Islands, the heteronormative behaviors I felt was so much tied to the African continent. And then when I came back to sort of the Netherlands and now in the UK, they were sort of I was sort of allowed to be more queer, right? So, and there's a lot of history there, because if we look at specifically the history, which I love to look at, is, you know, due to the colonialism and the history of colonialism, we see often that you know, the anti-LGBT legislations were brought in by the country that I'm currently in, right? So there's UK, the Netherlands, Belgium, and the US. And now there's a shift, and now this country are sort of kind of free. And then you go to the African continent, and there's where that heteronormativity and sort of the anti-transness exists, really, right? So it feels like they are behind, even though there was such a diversity to Blackness, transness, and even also gender neutrality there even. So it's really interesting to hear about all these perspectives. So I'm just going to go into the second question. What are other aspects of your identity which are important for you to highlight, and how do they intersect with your Black identity? Whoever wants to go, should I just go back to Joshua, because you were the first one who was responding last time?
Yeah, sure. I love this question, and when I read it, I was like, I already knew exactly what I was going to say. For me, a really important part of my identity is my vulnerability. I find that my vulnerability is very important to me, excuse me, because it has allowed for me to find freedom in myself and in my life, and also it's a healing tool for me. And how it intersects with my Blackness is that, you know, as Black people, especially as Black men, we are taught that we can't be emotional, we can't cry, we can't be vulnerable, we can't be soft or delicate. And so, you know, always hearing that, where we think that we can't be vulnerable. So for me, and it's very similar in the in Latinx culture too, right? In our households, you know, we're supposed to be the man of the house. So for me to be able to express my vulnerability and link that with my Blackness is very important to me, because it's a way for me to heal and to feel more in touch with who I am, and to know that I can give myself grace and be soft with myself, regardless of the stereotypes that are put onto us as Black people. And it also creates, I think, it allows for a door to be open for other people in our community to express themselves and to feel that they can be emotional, and to be vulnerable. And that creates so much, you know, joy and so much healing within our community, and it allows for us to grow. So for me, that's a huge important part of my identity, especially as someone who identifies as Black.
Yeah, very much. Chloe, do you want to go next?
So what's the question again?
So the question was, what are other aspects of your identity which are important for you to highlight? So just thinking about intersectionality and how this intersect with your Black identity specifically.
I guess my womanhood, my transness, also me being Nigerian, and in Nigeria, my ethnic group in Nigeria is Yoruba and Ishan. And they're all important because they like help me understand who I am. My transness is a part of me coming into my womanhood, and my womanhood is an expansive way of which I've like learned how to just be like loving and caring and like more free in my body, also listen to my body and be like in touch with my family, my friends, and it intersects with my Blackness because it's like I have such a foundation of like Black womanhood, that cis or trans, that like history wise and like narrative to this day is so powerful and strong that holds me and holds like who I am as a person. And also being Nigerian, like there's such a culture in which we don't really know, but like in the naming of Nigerian children, specifically Yoruba, there's no like they don't gender their children when they're like named. So like my Nigerian name is Deji, and that's given to boys or girls. And so like there's even this like way in which like now like Nigeria is quite colonized, so they would not agree with this. Definitely in the historical past, there was definitely like there must have been a reason in which structurally they did not find it meaningful to gender children around naming.
Yeah.
So I find that also really interesting to my history and to also who I am. So yeah.
No, I think what you both are talking about is the femininity and the masculine aspect that doesn't sit within the patriarchy, but rather sits outside of the patriarchy, right? And I feel that is such a change in that dynamic that we see. So yeah, no, I definitely hear that. Papa, do you want to respond to the question as well?
Yeah, sure. I think just like Chloe said earlier, our society as an African society, and you know, I indicated earlier, the African society has a lot of deep ingrained patriarchal values, you know, of what woman should be like and man should be like. If you're a man, you are supposed to be aggressive, you are supposed to be strong, and you know, the opposite for what a woman should be. And so as an intersex person and you know, someone who is gender non-binary, finding myself, I don't know, in between the stereotypes, social construct or outside these social constructs, there is a lot of conflict, you know, because it's a society that thrives a lot on classifications and boxing people. And so as someone who has refused to be boxed, you know, there is usually a lot of very interesting and mean ways of, you know, trying to fix you somewhere. So I feel like that is also very important. The fact that I am queer and I am also intersex. And so I do not fit within anybody's boxes or in anybody's list to just tick off.
Yeah. No, thanks so much for that. And yeah, I think within these last, I mean, for me specifically, just to give a background about my journey. So like I always knew that I was definitely a lot more masculine, but because women, Black women specifically, were seen as masculine, I was like, oh, maybe that's just what I am. You know, no, it actually turns out that my masculinity sat within my transness, right? And it was just so much more, and it was so much expansive that at one point my heart was just beating like, when are you coming out? And that is really the moment. And that was even, you know, I mean, my transness was, I want to say 5-6 years into it. I always knew about it, but I was like, I don't really get it, because you never grew up with it. But there's always this inkling, right? This feeling. But definitely in these last, I think 1, 2, 3 years, there has been a lot of re-understanding, unlearning and relearning, which I think a lot of people are going through, specifically if you are trans or if you are feeling, you know, you're moving away from your guilt and your shame, definitely living within the patriarchy. And I want to say the heterosexual, you know, cisgender patriarchal mindset that is very much from the West. It is really hard to move away from that. And I think specifically here in the West, we have seen definitely a rise more of trans individuals, what people are now calling a spike, but it's actually not a spike. It's just you remove something that was forced upon people and you will limit, you remove that. And now, of course, there's a spike, but there was never a spike. It's just these were always there. There are a lot of people who are now actually later in life transitioning, which is unfortunately too bad, but this is sort of the opportunity that happens. And just to go back to what I said, it is very interesting of what we see. And we have literally just, if you look at the government, specifically in the UK, it's a mess. And the reason why it's a mess is because it cannot exist anymore, not in the way that it was, not in the way that there's no power in that system doesn't work anymore, right? And I feel that there's often a lot of connection between the way that the government rules or doesn't rule or try to gain back control and the conversation that we are having about ourselves and our identity and how that is expanding, right? I see that all as one. So just to hear you all say that, again, it dives into what is the patriarchy, what is the masculinity and the femininity outside of the patriarchy. We can reframe it, we can renew it, we can, and it's something that I heard, I think a couple of months back, that trans and non-binary individuals are not are reliving their ancestral DNA. This is something that is ancestral. This is something that you cannot, it doesn't just come out of the blue. It's a very ancestral thing that people are going through. So I feel that definitely resonates with the answers you were given. So when it comes to, so I'm just going to the third question. When taught, Black history and queer history are often fragmented. On your journey of self exploration, have there been any role models and figures who have helped you frame or articulate your own identity? Papa, I'm going to go for you this time. Do you have any amazing role models or figures that we need to know of?
Unfortunately, I wouldn't say yes to that, especially for prominent role models. I wouldn't say yes. One of the things that we should know is, I don't know, but it's very general knowledge, was that Ghana and other African countries were colonized for a very long time. And so because of that, our history is extremely whitewashed. I can say even until university, I was still learning about the history of colonization and the benefits of colonization and slave trade. And the other thing too was that these countries that colonized us, Great Britain and colonial masters, were the same people who introduced homophobia to Ghana. And so because of that, we tend to have a very whitewashed history. And so there hasn't been a point in time when there is a historical figure or a prominent role model who was openly queer, because even if they were openly queer, they would completely be erased from our history or whitewashed, because at that particular point in time, the person wouldn't fit into what was to be ideal. And even when you consider now, I think I and a few other activists are even the role models, because because most of the work that we are doing, we are now, starting off. We don't really have an old movement. In fact, we weren't even collected together as organizations and working as organizations until about 2-3 years ago. So no, I wouldn't say yes.
Okay, and is that specifically in Ghana, or do you think, has there been any other, because I'm assuming also within the framework of activism, you have had to learn that from someone else, or do you feel that you were actually just going with what was needed and you were just figuring it out?
It's been
Okay.
trying to figure things out all on your own.
Right.
And, you know, sometimes aligning with a lot of, you know, people from outside. And so modeling your activism
Mhm.
by, you know, based on a model from outside Africa.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, the problem with that is that when it comes to human rights, when it comes to LGBT rights, countries outside Africa are way advanced than we are.
Yeah.
And so copying or modeling our way of activism according to what they do doesn't really come off effective. But
Mhm.
most of the time it's been learning everything all on your own, brainstorming with colleagues to, you know, come out with the best and hoping it works.
Okay. Thanks for that insight. Also, to the panelists who are here, if you do have resources, please do send them to Papa, because they will definitely be needing that, because we definitely are a global community. So if you have anything, send that over, which I hope will definitely be beneficial for you, Papa. I want to go to Joshua. I'll just like read out the question again. So when taught Black history and queer history are often fragmented, on your journey of self-exploration, have there been any role models or figures who have helped you frame or articulate? You were talking about Bayard Rustin, who was definitely also a hero of mine. One of the role models or the role model for you?
Well, to be honest, similar to Papa, like growing up, I didn't really have a role model. You know, per my last story of like in the way that I lost my mother and like who I grew up around. With that too, there was never really any queer people around me besides the people that were the same age as me, and they were also learning too. So I never had that representation. So I never really felt that I had any role models. And it wasn't until 2020 that I really actually learned about Bayard Rustin. I had heard about James Baldwin before and had read a book, but it never really clicked. And for that, I felt an immense amount of shame, because I'm like, oh, like, why don't I know about this Black queer man that has done all of this work for the Black community? Like, for me, that was like, oh my gosh, who am I? What am I? What am I doing? But to go back to the question, it wasn't up until recently that I felt like I have found a role model within the community. So I am an active member in the ballroom community. Within the ballroom community, I have found somebody that has became my mentor and who I now claim as my gay father, who was also a Black man. And we got really close, and I had let him know, I had divulged to him how insecure I feel and how insecure I have felt throughout my whole entire life. And you know, about many different things, my looks, my body, my presentation, everything. I just never felt, again, like I was connected to anything, or even felt like, you know, I was important or worthy. And meeting him, he was just like, you have a power in you, like you have a glow about you, you have a magnetism about you. And he's been helping me to really see that. And so it's been such an interesting and empowering moment in my life this past like a year and a half, because he has just been speaking so much love and care and power into me. And I still have moments of insecurities where I'm just kind of like, oh, you know, like, am I beautiful? Like, who am I? Do I belong to anyone? Am I worthy? And he just reminds me, you're powerful. You know, you're beautiful, you are who you are, and that's what makes you beautiful. And so that he has been such a huge role model for me in this last like year and a half. But as I continue to read, you know, go like reconnect to my roots, I'm learning more and more about people that have done the work before me in this space and in our communities. And I'm feeling like I'm more connected, but I think that I just have to continue to do the research. And just to put it out there to anyone that may be on this call and may feel the same as me, like, for a long time, I held a lot of shame that I didn't understand and know enough about my roots and my culture, my Blackness and my Latino heritage. And I just want to say, like, don't feel ashamed about that, because we have so many different experiences that have shaped who we are and have really, you know, made us or what am I trying to say? Like that our experiences are different from each other. And so just because one person may know more about their community or about their Blackness, for example, because that's the topic that we're talking about, it doesn't mean that you are less valuable or less Black or less queer. You know, take the journey that you're on right now and gain the experience and gain the knowledge because you belong here. And I have to tell myself that a lot. Like, I belong here. I have the right to this conversation and the right to put in my own feelings and emotions and my own experiences, which is why I'm so happy to be in this space and really adding into this conversation, because you know the topic is being Black
It
is
is
not
important.
right. And so that's my
Yes.
experience. Sorry.
No, that is totally fine. Thank you so much. So we have 4 more minutes for a couple of questions, and we do have some individual questions for y'all. Chloe, I'm gonna start with you. How do you address intersectionality and create bridges for awareness and education through your artistry? For some reason, I cannot get that word out today.
I guess it's like I already am an existence of a living embodiment of intersectionalities. And so through my poetry, I sort of work with my lived experiences as well as the imagination. And so I try to like convey ideas of like new worlds and also like retelling of the past. I try to like imagine what is stories of like trans feminine people in Yoruba folklore, because I haven't been able to find that. And I think I haven't been able to find that because there may have been, but that's definitely been erased because it would not fit into the narrative of a sort of like Yoruba culture that's very patriarchal and colonized right now. So even it's like the history is like hard to find. So in that I try to like, essentially imagine poetic folktales. And I think hopefully people sort of like are able to grasp these like concepts, because I think you kind of mentioned like people separate LGBT histories and Black histories from each other, when like Black people like have queer histories, are part of this trans community. And some would even say Black people are kind of queer. And just in our living embodiment. And so I tried to like just try to exist as honestly creatively within that, and show that. I even recently had a performance piece that was trying to take parts of my Yoruba and Ishan traditions of Orisha worship, but also highlight trans feminine empowerment and respect under that culture.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for that. I'm also very much aware of time, so we do have 2 questions, but we also have some questions in the Q&A. So 2 questions came true. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go straight into the Q&A and see if we are still able to ask the question that we had for you. But there was someone, let's see, we had, let me just double check this, if this would work. Yes, so we have a question from Kimberly Daniels. Can you help me? When would a person identify as being Black, and when would a person identify as being brown? I get confused at times. Who wants to take that one? I can take that one actually. That's totally fine. Yeah. So when it comes to Black and brown, so we have to first actually have an understanding of what we mean when we say Black and brown, right? So when we are talking about the African ancestry, I am actually quite brown in relations to the identities or the different colors that we have within the African continent and the African diversity and the Blackness there, right? But when it comes to the Western and sort of the global understanding of society, I identify as Black, and that is because people have identified me as non-white, therefore Black. And then people who are non-white, let's just say South Asian, or have another sort of ethnicity, they would be considered as brown, right? So you have to double check, you have to make a distinction between the African continent and what we say, you know, the different diversities of our colors, but also within the wider context of that. I hope it answers the question. So Black is very much within is what we definitely within this context mean when we say Black versus brown. I hope that answers your question. We do have another question. How do you navigate being intersex, non-binary in a society that only admits male or female? And I think that is for Papa.
Can you hear me, Z?
Yeah, I can.
Wow. This question and the time we have, can I answer?
You can. I mean, that's why somebody asked.
Well, I just want to maybe in a very simple way. I think my sense of non-binariness is, for me, very internal. And so despite, you know, identifying as non-binary, I have still had to conform, you know, to the society of, you know, the society's definition of maleness. That is because mainly for my safety, and also the fact that it is completely criminalized, you know, identifying as non-binary, and you know, there are a lot of there's also a lot of hate and homophobia, and so I really, in a very simple way, it's way more complicated than that, but I try as much as possible to, you know, not, I wouldn't say stick to the norms, because I obviously am not. I have earrings, and I have done my hair, so I am obviously not. But then this is not even how I want to express myself. But if I want to live, I can't help it.
Yeah, that's true. I think what you're saying here, just reframing it, or not reframing it, but just like concluding it, is you have to live within what makes you feel safe as well, right? Because you're walking down the street, you have to get home at one point. So there, of course, there are people who assume that you are versus how you feel, and that can, you know, of course, be difficult to navigate. So that totally makes sense, because of course, again, like I think all of us here, there is this feeling that needs to get out, of course, and you want to have that representation. So we do actually have time, Joshua, to go to your question. So we had a specific question for you, and thank you again, Papa, for answering that. Joshua, what do you think is holding back a better understanding of the nuances within the Black experiences and how it plays out, especially in the workplace?
Yeah, I think that being able to hear people's stories and really understanding that people within the Black community come from many different experiences is going to really help people within, for example, corporate culture, to understand that we are not a monolith, right? I think that within corporate culture, there's this misunderstanding that the only Black people that are successful or worthy are ones that are cisgendered and heterosexual and college educated, which is furthest from the truth, right? I, for example, don't have a college education. I don't have a college degree, but I hold a leadership position in a company. And so I think that for me, the experience of being able to tell my story has widened the opportunity for me to be able to be heard, and for people to understand that my experience is very much different than the one that is stereotyped as what I had just said before. And so I think that if we can have people in leadership positions to hear our stories, like through workshops like this, that we would be able to push through these stereotypes and have people understand the many nuances within the Black community, and the different Black identities. And that would then definitely reshape the way that corporate culture is right now, because it's very centered still around white supremacist culture. And so if we continue to be able to tell our stories, that's definitely going to help to change the way in which the workplace is right now.
Yeah. No, I think like what you said, yeah, I mean, of course, what I do is as well, just making sure that people understand the lived experiences and that we're not a monolith, and skills and is related to a person is just a skill that has nothing to do with their identity, but it is very important to bring your identity into a workplace. Cool. So thank you everyone for that. I am trying to stay within time, but again, thank you Chloe, Papa, and Joshua very much for giving your honest and very vulnerable answers to this, and I hope definitely that people have taken some with them. I will be giving it back to Melis.
Thank you so much, Z and Chloe, Papa, Joshua, just sharing the variety of experiences that I heard, and it's really sitting with me, and even just how in the way we give and experience allyship, how that approach in itself is kind of quite nuanced. So it was quite powerful to see that there's not one size that fits all, but continuously kind of creating, bridges and opportunities, whether it's, through Chloe's work, for example, poetry that, gives words and language to our human experience and really opens kind of new worlds for people to understand what they don't understand or what they don't know. And, Joshua, you yourself in the workplace, kind of engaging in specifically in your position in recruitment as well, how you're trying to shape narratives through that and creating space for other people to be seen and to have opportunities as well, touching on the fact that you probably, are not if we look at the idea of a leadership, all of the tick boxes, we don't have to tick them. We can already come as ourselves with our gifts and still hold that position and really make, opportunities happen. And you, Papa, from where you are in Ghana, finding that authenticity, what it means to you, but then navigating elements of safety, but also advocacy as well through your work and how you speak and how you write. I mean, it's just fascinating to me that we're all in various parts of the world, but trying to do what we do and living in the way that feels right and educating just by being who we are. So thank you so much for everyone who shared, everyone who had asked questions, Z as well for moderating and dropping just knowledge and nuances on Blackness and all the other elements that were explored today. So that's it from us. This month, really, we're carrying on until, I think we've got another one in November. December, we're actually taking a break. Surprise, surprise. But as you see, there's a link shared in the chat. If you want to stay in touch with us, please kind of feel free to tap into all of those resources. And next month, we'll be really looking at breaking the stigma around the experiences of queer folks who also happen to kind of navigate asylum seeking and refugee status. And, again, bringing an intersectional perspective on this and listening to stories as best as we can and looking at this problematic and how it impacts us and the roles that we can play as individuals who are seeking to make change, but just as human beings as well. So I hope we get to see you here next month. And until then, please take care of yourselves. For those of you who are actively engaged during Black History Month, look after yourselves even more. And we really look forward to reconnecting soon. That's it, on time.
Right, amazing. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone.
Everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Everybody's going. Ooh.
Hi.